The pure and applied science of the human will. There are two forces in this world. Only one is real. The other imaginary. These two forces are the physical force we call energy and which decays over time in a process called entropy. There is another force, however, that is referred to as the human will. Like the energy force, the human will is not well understood. However, we know it differs from the physical force in that the human will tends to get more powerful over time. It becomes more focused and more deliberate and manifests itself as economic development, civilization and science. What we do know, and cannot dispute, is that the power of the physical world manifest as natural energy and the power of the human mind manifest as our human will, are not compatible. One or the other is not only redundant but incomprehensible when considered alongside of the other. These are mutually incompatible concepts. The conclusion is that an experiment is required to demonstrate which force is the operational one and which the fanciful one. The world has already adopted the idea of a physical force operating in the natural world and sufficing as a natural explanation for what we observe happening. However, despite the success of the physical sciences, some caution must be advanced when discussing the humanities. The concept of an all-pervasive force of nature causing what we see humans do, is not well attested and it might be said, is counterfactual to what we observe. Free will is obviously a testament to the idea of there being a human will. It is a difficult concept to eliminate, as it takes an act of the human will to deny the existence of a human will, and who wishes to deny they have freedom of choice. That being said, the proponents of the natural force position will point out, our human will operates almost solely within the human mind, indeed within the confines of our skill. There is no sign of a human will operating in the natural world, if we explain everything by reference to natural forces. Added to this is that the humanities have not generated a theory of the human will that has led to any major scientific advances, whereas the focus on the operations of physical forces has produced amazing scientific breakthroughs. The crucial factor will be the hardening of the humanities, whilst retaining the precision of the physical sciences. That this will come from the physical side of science is unlikely. They have pretty much given up on rationalizing human behavior. The best approach was the invention of instinct, which is an idea less and less applicable to animal behavior, and never of much use to explain human behavior. The biggest hurdle the humanities encounter is in dealing with religion or finding a place for religion in science. Yet, the human will is integral to Christianity. It may be easier to demonstrate the physical sciences are a branch of the humanities, or even Christianity, than to explain religion by advancing a theory based on the forces found in atoms. Christianity at least does explain nature by reference to an intellectual and metaphysical event. There is more sense to this than many supporters of naturalists' explanations realize. The Bible says God spoke the world into existence. This would make reality information-based. When we look at physical forces, we see nothing. There is no entity pushing atoms around. There is nothing physical about gravity. We say these forces are part of a physical reality when in fact, physical reality is nothing but the forces themselves. An atom is not composed of things with forces, but of forces of various kinds. Even the particle, when not interacting and so being given a location by the impact, is nothing more than a wave, but it is a wave without anything being propagated. Such as a wave in water propagating water pressure. If the world is composed of information, then will is a natural component or ancillary factor. Or, perhaps better, if reality is information, then will is the purveyor and carrier of that information. The human will is like the power grid. Information is the current that is generated and transmitted using the various forms of communication available to us. But how do we quantify information in a way that is scientifically useful? The electrical grid does work, it produces energy that is turned into motion, and this produces force. Information by its very nature produces value. Values can be measured. What is more, even work in the physical sciences produces work, simply because work has value. It has value because it produces value. The key to any quantification is the standard used. If we understand the creation story, a solution emerges. God spoke the world into existence. Reality was created as information. This information was communicated to man. Jesus is the Word, and the Holy Spirit is the truth within us. We understand reality because it is logical. The universe makes sense to us because it is a coherent analytical creation. We know truth by its coherency. Now the physical world is suited for life but not human life. We are required to work, that is how we live. This is a consequence of sin. But working as an individual is not effective. Even communities have very low levels of subsistence culture if each person focuses on supplying his own needs. It takes a developmental leap to create a civilization. Individuals have to specialize. All progress is the result of increased specialization. Specialization only happens, or at least only has an appreciable effect if everyone or at least a large percentage of the community engages in it. This creates trade. You and I both work at a specialized task and then trade the product of our labor to increase the absolute value of what we do. What has confounded socialists and capitalists is that they think they are the measure of good and evil. They think they are the standard of value. So, either the state of the private owner evaluates the worth of others and pays him accordingly. The is absurd, and as might be expected, we end up with singers and athletes being paid for than doctors and scientists. This is where democracy comes in, not the liberal democracy that prioritizes property owners but the democracy that gives power to the people being those who have power, in contrast to usurping the power of the people. Democracy is about the rights of the people as defined by those with a sentient will. To understand what we mean by this and where we are going with this, we have to refer back to the laws of nature and the use of force as a justifier. Our argument is that there are two systems configured in response to two sources of power, the human will and the natural law. The natural law is the law of nature, or what some call the law of the jingle. In the physical arena we talk about impacts and acceleration and mass. When translated into the human realm, physical force becomes aligned with muscle mass and military might. In nature, might makes right and the end justifies the means. This is very much typifies what the law is. The law is only opinion if not regulated and enforced by those who have superior means of coercion. The law regulates coercion. It makes tyranny more predictable and therefore, tolerable. But the law is a very tenuous protection as it can always be changed. In the natural system, our value is determined by our relationship with the elites. These are the ones with the power and the control over property. In the democratic system, value is not determined by power brokers. A different value system is invoked. There is only one alternative to the rule of power and legitimacy through the brute force of the natural system. The alternative is the power of the will as exercised through intelligence. The corollary to this is the creation of value. In the abstract, rarefied nature of things, this would be manifested in the development or further elaboration of an equation. Mathematical knowledge is a raw expression of the human will. The mathematician creates value through the raw expression of the human will. But what has value, or how do we determine value? Value is determined by measuring the force of the will. The starting or resting point is nature or capital. The difference between nature and capital is that capital has been identified as having the potential to be improved or has been previously improved, by the will of man. The will works on nature to improve the value of nature. We do this in hours. So value can and is expressed in hours of work done and given a value in terms of a unit of account, that is, the thing normally considered to be money. However, humanity has been stumped by knowing only the ownership of the state and the ownership by capitalists. But this puts too much power into private and bureaucratic hands. Ownership is an act of will. Nature was created by the will of God and is therefore owned by God. Man can, by an act of will, seemingly take ownership of nature, but we cannot command nature, and so our ownership of nature is illusory. What we can command and control is our minds. We can articulate ideas and transform reality according to the products of our will. This is how advancements are made. But we have to have access to capital. Authority is given to a capitalist to steward a pool of capital in the form of an enterprise. People work for the company and are paid for the work they do, that is, the value added to the capital of the enterprise. The business determines the work of the individual as regards the profitability of the individual company, but who or what determines the value of the individual enterprise? Is it simply a matter of making money? If I am willing to pay for X, is X a product or service that ought to be produced? Is the objective of business to satisfy demand, or is there something higher we can aspire to? Is the individual consumer king? This is where we encounter the problem of individual and personal sin. Because if the demand was not there, certain goods and services would not be sold. To some extent then, demand has to be local, it cannot be determined by external forces, and it has to have value, that is, be a source of value. The poor do not know how to or are not permitted to create value. The poor are consumers of value, not producers. Some people are parasites and consume more than they produce. Consumption is not a value, but some sell consumption and treat consumption as a value. This system makes no distinction between producing value, producing consumption. Why are so many obese and addicted to porn? They are consumers. Only children are consumers. Everyone else is or ought to be a producer. The value of a product is not always in the product, but in the spin-offs, the industry that surrounds it, such as the movies business. Superficially it resembles the porn industry, but the spin-offs from the movie industry are substantial. But what is the line that divides porn from conventional productions? Will is expressed through property. Without matter manipulated through conceptualizations, will is invisible, it cannot be manifested. Therefore, the level of democracy is equal to the per capita capital value, or the amount of capital each person has available to them. Our vote, or expressive will, means nothing if there is nothing to operate. We need property and we accumulate property through the agency of the will. Our choices either result in capital accumulation or a decrease. The production of porn and drugs does not result in the accumulation of capital. The difference between what we produce and consume is our charitable factor. What we invest in capital is a charitable act. Therefore, the unit of science is the preferred share, which measures the value produced. The question to ask, how much capital is being added, in conventional terms this was often considered to be the profitability of the operation. But in a conventional capitalist enterprise, this was considered to be owner's capital. But who is the owner? Not the person who acquires property through force. Ownership is expressed through the will. The one who truly controls the property is the one who rightfully owns it. No one controls reality but the one who created it, and that is God. We own only what we produce, and this is works or what is produced by work, by our labor. Work creates capital and capital is labor unrealized. Economists claim owner's capital is what the owner of the business does not liquidate or has invested in a business. Capital is really the value of labor not taken by labor. Capital is the unrealized gains of labor and is therefore a charitable act. The existence and growth of capital is the true charity. Every cent not taken by labor but earned by the work of labor, is a manifest act of charity recorded to the accounts of he or she who produced it. It is the rate of capital accumulation per capita that determines our progress and the value of what we do. Leadership is judged on the basis of their group's performance compared to the average. The individual is judged on the basis of their performance compared to the average of their group. In this way, we are bound on earth by our church, or group. It also gives us a way to determine truth and reason, for if our performance and the performance of our group is improved by what we do, we have a worthy product. We are using our time well. If we find that we do not pay our own way, with what we are doing, if we are creating costs for others, then we are a negative drag on our group and the world. The planet's capital accumulation rate or the rate at which capital increases worldwide gives us an objective determination as to the value of what we do.